And I am very pleased to introduce one of our heroes, Tom Goldtooth. He's the executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, and he has been a champion for us in all the struggles against pipelines and fossil fuels and everything related to climate. And Tom, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time. Tomorrow he's going to be introducing other people también, also from the Indigenous Environmental Network. We hope you don't miss tomorrow's panel. It's going to be amazing. But today we have Tom. So Tom, thank you so much. I leave you the microphone, and maybe there will be some questions and answers at the end, and I can help facilitating.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint if I can. Thank you for the invitation. Our network, the Indigenous Environmental Network, is a firm supporter of Soil Not Oil Coalition. And last time I was on was in San Francisco when Governor Brown and Mike Bloomberg were having a global climate summit. So it's good to be back and talk to the audience and on some very important topic. As an indigenous person, I'm calling in from northern Minnesota in the country of the United States and right south of the Canadian border, not far from the birthplace or headwaters of the Mississippi River. What I want to talk about is our indigenous people's perspective on the global transformation and just transition of humanity and Mother Earth. It's a very important period of time that we are in right now. There's so many different changes that are going on, so many pressure points of many magnitude, and I've been fortunate to consult with our spiritual elders, and I'm getting up in that category as well. Also engaging with our women's societies and our young people. So this transformation and the need to look at the protection of our maka, the earth, the soil, is very important. Of course, the water and the whole ecosystem. First, I want to give some understanding of the area where I live, right west of us as the woodland ends as we go into the prairie land, is that when we say soil not oil, that is something that we pray for because we live in the reality of fossil fuel development here in the United States. And this is a indigenous reserve, an indigenous land and territory called Fort Berthold. And that is in the area called the Bakken Oil Shield. Hydrofracking is alive and well there. And this is dated about 5 years ago. There were 17 oil and gas leases there, and that has increased. One of the issues that come with oil development is man camps. Most of the people that the corporations bring in are men, and there's a lot of domestic and sexual abuse of our women in these oil corporations, fossil fuel infrastructures, and extractive industry. So we have to deal with murdered and missing women, indigenous women, both here in the United States and Canada. I want to quickly talk about how fracking has contaminated our soils in North Dakota, and it's rich in farming and ranching territories, but with the salt water or the brine, B-R-I-N-E, that's part of the contamination in the hydro-fracturing that takes place up here. It kills the soil. And so I want to show some pictures of that on how soil and oil does not mix. Here you see a color differentiation here, the bottom half. that's been contaminated by the spills of the salt water from the fracking process. Again, when I say salt water, I'm not talking of the salt water of the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles away from that. This is part of the process in hydrofracking. So you can see how devastating the grasslands and the vegetation and the soil is. This is some of the tribal people in the government, the environmental protection, trying to continue to steady and how they're going to proceed in cleaning up. You can see the difference between the yellow in this grass, in the background, the green. This man is one of the private landowners, and part of the remediation are trying to do the cleanup of saltwater brine in hydrofracking. They got to dig into the soil. And that's not an easy thing to do as far as reclamation, to restore this dirt. It's become dirt. It's not enriched anymore. It's the dead soil dirt. And the question is still remaining, how do you restore this terrain back to healthy soil? This is just a quick photo of the area of the reserve that is indigenous, and you will see the water there. The black line actually is the original river, and part of the energy policy of the United States back in 1947 to 1953 is that they built the Garrison Dam. They dammed up the Missouri River. What happened as a result of that was the massive flooding of all the bottomland, the rich nutrient farmland of the indigenous peoples of the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Rikara, the three affiliated tribes that live at Fort Berthold. You can see all the land that was flooded. It's in the blue reserve reservoir area now. This is some photos on how it used to be. Very rich farmland, and the culture of these tribes is based upon their farming. This is some of the people that were standing along the Missouri River before it was flooded around late 1940s. This is a picture of the indigenous women that would tend to the soil, growing their crops. This was the signing of the order of authorizing the construction of the Garrison Dam. You will see the tribal chairman there, standing there. He's crying. This was devastating, and it was a forced choice. It was not an agreement that they really wanted to do as indigenous peoples. And this is some of the corn that they're bringing back now. And we've been part of this just transition, a transformation of helping the people there to bring back their rich culture and relationship to the soil. So there's been a legacy of exploitation, ecocide, and environmental injustice, climate injustice within indigenous lands, not only in the north, but as you know, in the global south. We have brothers and sisters we work with in Ecuador that are dealing with this issue all over the world. So that legacy of the contamination that's been left is still a big issue to this day. And what we're asking for in this presentation is to lift up to that reality as that humanity has to reevaluate what its relationship is to the sacredness of Mother Earth. This is related to this legacy. It's related to our soils, our earth, and how are we participating in the solutions to have a healthy climate, to have a healthy ecosystem, a healthy soil. So what I want to talk about is the new forms of capitalism and neoliberalism with its false incentives that are designed to actually keep business as usual. In fact, up in this area of the world, there's the expansion of the extraction of these industries, like in the tar sands, for an example, in northern Canada, where its pipelines are coming through our territories in the south to be exported out at these ports and terminals in the Gulf. So these are very big issues I want to briefly talk about. It's around the responsibilities that we all have as humanity. The audience here of this conference is what is that relationship and the duties that we have as humanity to that sacredness of Mother Earth. What is this concept that indigenous peoples are sharing around the global transformation of humanity for Mother Earth, but also Father Sky? And for us as indigenous people, our foundation and our belief, our cosmos vision, our spiritual center comes from the great mystery, the great spirit. I've talked with brothers and sisters, the Hunaquai people in Brazil, for an example, and they have the same beliefs. The people in South Africa, the Khoi people, I've talked to them, they have the same beliefs as us about that relationship to nature, to the circle of life. And they have original instructions. So people ask us, what do you want to share to people who are trying to come together and protect the earth, the soil? Like I said, our relationship to the star nation, the cosmos, the cosmology, cosmovision that we have as we look into the heavens and the stars, that is a lot of teachings that we have. My mom is Dene, she's Navajo, and in our beliefs, this symbol here of sand painting symbolizes the Father Sky and the Mother Earth. So one cannot exist without the other. This is part of the creative principles of the natural laws of Mother Earth. And this symbolizes some of that relationship between the sky and the earth, are the waters and the universe. All those little circles talks about the 13 moons. The 13 moons that we have in this world. That's our calendar, the 13 moons, and the relationship that people have in the lodge in the center with the animal nation of the waters and the spirits. Water is a center of our beliefs, and that's all through the world. Water is life, and that's not blue. In the Navajo beliefs, we are the five-finger clan people. All people that have the thumb and work with the thumb, we are the five-finger people. And we can use our minds and how we use that thumb. But also with that, if we're not developed as humanity, our evolution of where we're at, this thumb can become destructive. And that's our concern of where we're at these days. So part of this, what we want to talk about with you is this issue of the objectification, quantification of the natural world, the concepts of dominion. Dominion, somehow a concept of religion that believe that man has dominion over Mother Earth in the same way that man objectifies women and has dominion over the woman. So with that comes this control mechanisms and property rights that imposes a monetary and economic value on trees, water, seeds, and soil as well, and the sacred and many of the sacred circle of life that we have in the world. It's linked to capitalism. If we are concerned about economics, economic globalization, we really got to think deep when we're talking about our relationship to land and capitalism. And woven into that are some terminology such as natural capital accounting. ecological services, financialization of nature, green economy. If you remember in the Rio Plus 20 at Rio de Janeiro, there was a movement of people of the world that resisted the green economy concept that was being promoted by the United Nations, by United States, and many of the industrialized countries and large NGOs and the World Bank. But also other terminologies like nature-based solutions. And I want to focus in my final presentation about that. But also, when we talk about nature, we talk about natural resources, we talk about land, territories, water, we talk about the soil, farming practices, and we have to deal with these legal systems around property rights. Who owns that? One of the grandmothers that passed away decades ago, who was involved with protecting Big Mountain on our Dene Navajo reservation in the southwest of the United States. She went to the United Nations. She did the intervention, and she said she's there to speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. And she had her earth bundle. She was talking about the Mother Earth to speak for her. And she was really effective with lifting that up. She was there to protect her land from coal mining, speaking for the plants and the earth. That laid out our participation, by the way, in the movement on the rights of nature and the rights of Mother Earth. So in my remaining minutes, I want to talk about this new concept that has been very, very popular in the past conference of the parties of the governments participating in the United Nations framework on climate change. At the last meeting that we had a delegation of indigenous peoples of the North and South in Madrid, Spain, at the climate meeting, we saw posters, we saw a lot of materials around this concept of nature-based solutions. For those of us that have been working on our issues around carbon markets, carbon trading, carbon offsets, we said this must be the same thing, and it was. The greenwashing of Mother Earth, of pollution, nature climate solutions. Maybe some of you have heard about this, because a lot of our farmers are being approached with the concept of using the process of soil or carbon sequestration in their land, and they can get payments for that, for not tilling their soil or using other practices. So this is part of that that world of how ecosystems related approaches are being brought into the carbon emission market system, and how they use nature, the circle of life, as a sponge for air pollution. And they say that's cutting greenhouse gas emissions at source, which it does not. We have a lot of evidence of that. So part of the nature-based solution that they are promoting out there are saying that they want to sequester emissions in the forests, in the grasslands, the soils, wetlands, deserts, oceans, agriculture, and use it also with rice and cover crops. And even in the city areas, you see these trees, these tree pits. Some of them have WWF panda bear on it. And we're very concerned about that within our network and our frontline indigenous peoples, because we're really looking for real solutions. And as we look into these different mechanisms, it does not cut emissions at source. That's our big concern, and that is part of carbon colonialism, and perpetuates a disaster capitalism. It doesn't address climate issues. We found that Shell Oil is investing $300 million in this, and it allows it to look good on paper that they've invested in sequestering carbon as an offset. Well, far away, like in Richmond, California, they're actually expanding their oil refinery operations there. So this is where we feel we have to really look as people who are fighting for the restoration of our lands, our soils, our farmers, is that we have to look at the devil in the details. We have no issue with farming practices that are involved with healing our land, healing our soils, sequestering the carbon, but doing it outside of a market system. Because there's usually contracts when somebody comes to our farmers and say, hey, we'll pay you just to sequester your carbon. Isn't that good? But a lot of our folks don't understand that money is coming from the dirty polluters. Rio Tinto has been involved with some of this. As indigenous peoples, we're very concerned because in some of these arenas, indigenous peoples' rights to their land have been limited, and they've been sometimes forcibly removed in these areas. So as indigenous network, we see this initiative, this phenomenon of polluters, large NGOs and the UN as stealing our narrative when they say, well, we're just connecting people and nature. What's wrong with that? They're saying, you know, that this is a holistic, people-centered response to climate change. So that's what my presentation I wanted to talk about, that it imposes property rights on life, privatizes and sell nature. It involves a trading mechanism. Who, at the end of the day, who owns that carbon in the fields out there in the land? It's been bought, it's been rented. The carbon credits through that process, it belongs to a corporation far away. So to treat nature as a commodity in the market trading system, we got to really look at that, if that's something that we want to participate in, and apply our environmental ethics to these issues. You know, we see this as a commodification issue of air and life. So it's a corruption of the sacred. That may be harsh words for some people, but with our spiritual leaders, that's what we say. It's a continuation of that black snake. So responsibility and relationship is very important for everyone, not just indigenous peoples. And we have to protect and defend the territorial integrity of Mother Earth, and protect the rights of Mother Earth, and say no to privatization and ownership of nature. Thank you.